Thanks for tuning in to Curious Cat, where we examine the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. I have a new night job. I've been crossing the dead over to the beyond in my sleep. Unbelievable, right? Well, today we're getting weirder than usual. We've been together over a year. Can you believe it? I'm grateful for every second we've spent together, and I don't know what this podcast will look like a year from now, but I'm hoping it'll have conversations about UFOs, maybe more Sasquatch stuff, true crime subjects, some supernatural phenomenon. I don't have the details nailed down, but what I know for certain, if I choose to publish an episode, then it was drafted by my higher self and offered in love. Today's episode is no different. I'm about to publicly air an ongoing conversation I've been having between my awake and asleep selves. No filter. Since January, as I sleep, I've been helping people who died cross over to the beyond. I promise I'll share the juicy details in the second half of the episode, but for now, let's begin at the beginning. Western science and death. The lines between life and death have never been more blurred than they are today, at least for Western culture. In fact, we're the only culture that's only now catching up to worldviews that have long believed in reincarnation or that cycle of life, death, and rebirth in perpetuity. Recent scientific findings are making one thing crystal clear as of late. We don't actually know what happens to us after we die. Even the definition of death is up for debate. Is it the moment our heart stops beating or when our brain activity ceases? Doctors define the moment of death loosely as no heartbeat, no breath, no brain activity. That's what's commonly referred to as being clinically dead. There's a great deal of debate as new information is collected about cells that are continuing to grow and shape after we've taken our last breath. For those of you that have had a near-death experience, you've caught glimpses of the beyond. I've shared sacred space with someone as they passed and came away with a soul depth of understanding that death is not the end. Our higher selves know the truth. Ask your higher self to reveal that truth to you in a way you're comfortable with. And if you're seeking answers, maybe just look at nature. Nature kind of reveals the truth, doesn't it? What in nature can you name stops growing, dies, and then ceases to exist? Nothing. It exists in a different form. It rots and then it becomes part of the soil and it continues on. The entire natural world, in fact, reduces, reuses, and recycles. So why would our souls be any different? Physics tell us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just flows, changes form and function, and still is. So let's get into the most recent research on life after death. Did you know that zombie brain cells are found to continue growing after death? Yeah, here's some very fun news. After you die, you're not completely dead. In a new study, scientists from the University of Illinois, Chicago reveal that some genes express more actively in the human brain after death. How do these zombie genes still hang around exactly? The answer, they say, is a popular combination of common sense and surprise. Remarkably, as the neuronal cell clusters rapidly fall, there's a reciprocal and dramatic increase in the expression of the glial cell cluster, is what they say. What explains this zombie gene activity? In his statement, corresponding author Jeffrey Loeb explains the sensible answer. That glial cells enlarge after death isn't too surprising given that they are inflammatory and their job is to clean up after brain injuries like oxygen deprivation or even a stroke, he explains. So in a way, the article goes on, the glial genes represent a cleanup crew that's only activated after a messy incident like brain surgery. So while 80% of genes stayed stable over time, the neuronal and glial genes represent the other 20%. The glial or zombie genes peaked their increased activity after about 12 hours on average. I was listening to a recent podcast about near-death experiences, and a guest on one episode said that 90% of our brain is hardwired for the pre-death and death experience. That seems like, to me, an exit ramp hardwired to transport our souls or consciousness somewhere else before the body is done. Evidence of life after death was once anecdotal at best, but it's been a question long pondered by humanity. Thanks to doctors, psychiatrists, and doggedly determined journalists like Leslie Kean, for example, the scientific community is amassing quite a bit of data that verifies that consciousness continues on after the human body has stopped. But it's not that simple, is it? I mean, in order to perform open heart surgery, they cool down the body, the person, the actual patient. They tilt up one end of the surgery table. They remove all of the blood from the body. They stop the heart and brain activity. So the result is that that person is clinically dead. Oh, and another fun fact, it's believed the sense of smell is the last sense to go before death. I read a book recently. It was Leslie Kean's book, and it's called Surviving Death. And in it, she tells the story of the shoe that became the Shroud of Turin of Harborview. So I'm going to summarize the story, but I really encourage you to use the links in the show note and buy the book for yourself and read through it. It's full of all sorts of scientifically gathered information as well as her own personal stories. So what Leslie Kean called the the shoe that would become the Shroud of Turin of Harborview. Harborview is the name of the hospital in Seattle. It's an emergency care hospital predominantly where this woman had been brought. And her heart, after it gave out, they resuscitated her, brought her back to life. And when she came back, she told them the story of what she had observed. She had seen herself from the corner up in the top corner of the ceiling. She'd watched herself. She'd watched the medical crew come in and resuscitate her. She watched a scroll of paper that came down and was gathering underneath where they were taking care of her. I don't know if they operated or what. And then she had the most amazing experience, as if that wasn't enough. She was outside of the hospital itself, and she was way up high where she was able to observe on the ledge of Harborview. She saw a tennis shoe, and she described it with a scuff on one part of the toe. I mean, the details were incredible. So one of the attending, I believe she was like a sociologist, psychologist that was there as like a counselor type function. She decided to honor this woman and to go take a look at how she could possibly scientifically discount what she said. But first she wanted to take a look and find that shoe. So she went to the second floor and walked around and looked out all the windows and didn't see anything. Eventually she went up to the top floor of the hospital, and she found that a lot of the windows were actually blocked by files, file cabinets, things like that just precluded you from seeing anything. But what was crazy is she was about to give up, and she looked out a window, and right there on the ledge was a tennis shoe, just as the patient had described. She couldn't believe it. They were able to get the tennis shoe, and they looked, and where you could not see unless you were floating outside of the hospital, like say you were a drone, right? You couldn't see this, but the patient had reported it, this scuff on the toe of the shoe, which was just absolutely incredible. And it started this woman who observed this and documented this story down a rabbit hole for the rest of her life, where she wanted to ask patients that had flatlined if they had had a near-death experience. So she began to track that in her career. So the other thing that she documents, Leslie Kane, the author of the book, she highlighted lots of past lives, like very rich past lives from mostly United States people, because that's where her penchant was. And there's lots of documented cases elsewhere in the world that she goes on to say, because they're more accepting of it. So when kids come forward with this information, they're not closing it off and telling them in certain ways to shut it down and not bring that information forward. Anyway, there's one story in there about a little boy who remembers being a big shot in Hollywood. I mean, he is even irritated that his mom doesn't have staff and that his room isn't clean enough. And he has the same mannerisms. He wears wire-rimmed glasses all the time. And the story of it is just absolutely phenomenal. They go on to document, they find people. He remembers from a book, a very old book about Hollywood. He said, "That's me. I was in this movie with my friend." And they start trying to find this person's name because he was such a peripheral character. He wasn't listed in the credits way back when. But they did find his name. And sure enough, he was an agent in Hollywood at the time. He helped actors and actresses to change their, birth given names to a more of a Hollywood type name. So that was his specialty. They bring him to the old office place, and he walked around like which he would have if that was him. He knew the place like the back of his hand. It's charming. It's so interesting. And it kind of changes your mind about some of these preconceived notions about reincarnation, which kind of change everything about life after death. Another book that I found and read it's called After. And the subtitle is "A Doctor Explores What Near-Death Experiences Reveal About Life and Beyond." The author of it is Bruce Grayson, and he is a doctor, and he's the co-founder of IANDS, and he's taken it upon himself to document near-death experiences. The IANDS stands for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And he says in the early pages of the book, "What I found in that 45-year journey was a record of NDEs that go back centuries and encircle the globe. I discovered that NDEs are common and play no favorites. Even neuroscientists have them." Further in the book, he says, NDE research actually shows that by applying methods of science to the non-physical aspects of our world, we can describe reality much more accurately than if we limit our science to nothing but physical matter and energy. And that sort of blew my mind, that passage.
Hey everybody, Karen Rontowski here. I hate to interrupt the Curious Cat podcast, one of my favorites, but if you want to double your paranormal fun when you're done here, come check out my show, Paranormal Karen. I interview exorcists, demonologists, healers, psychics, really anyone that can make a family gathering uncomfortable is on my show. If you want to see everything I do, go to KarenRontowski.com. And I know you're thinking, that sounds hard to spell. Well, it is. I have misspelled it on hundreds of tax forms. So if that doesn't work for you, go to PsychicStandup.com or ParanormalKaren.com. There you can find my Patreon. You can book a tarot reading. You can take a tarot class. You can find everything, including my stand-up comedy clips. That's right, I've been doing stand-up for 30 years. If you go to those places, you can also see my psychic stand-up show where I mix psychic and tarot readings. Yes, the future never looked so funny. So check me out at KarenRontowski.com, ParanormalKaren.com, or PsychicStandup.com. And can someone please find me a marketing person to put all this in one place? Now back to the show.
So is there proof that there's a soul? From 2 of my season 1 episodes, scientists continue to this day to prove the existence of the soul. Over 100 years ago, a doctor claimed the weight of the soul was 21 grams, and you'll hear that a lot, based on a post-mortem weight of one deceased elderly patient. It's a number that's been quoted a lot and, is the true weight of the soul, but it hasn't been backed up by subsequent studies. So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Robert Lanza, a leading scientist in neurodegenerative medicine, agrees life does not end when the body dies. Lanza suggests that complex phenomena like dreams, imagination, and memory indicate a vital life force which exists independent of the body. He says that research suggests that a part of the mind, the soul, is immortal and exists outside of space and time. Lanza claims that space and time are not objects or things, but rather tools of our animal understanding. Lanza says that we can carry space and time around with us like turtles with shells, meaning that when the shell comes off, space and time, we still exist. I wanted to take a moment to highlight that in this episode, Native American oral histories of life and death. So if you listen to Cascadia number 1, the 1700 earthquake episode, then no doubt you sensed my, I guess I should call it frustration at groups that continue to discount the oral histories of Native Americans, giving their rich histories no credence. I get mad about it just thinking right now about it. But in the case of the 1700 earthquake, stories of the epic event were told and retold by tribes up and down the west coast of the United States for hundreds of years. They used the event through these stories to keep future generations safe and aware because the earthquake, they said, would come again. On the other hand, it took Western scientists until 1984 to catch up and see the proof of the quake and also the subsequent 20-some-odd epic 9.2 earthquakes that preceded it. And that just disturbs me. But that's why I want to turn this conversation back to Native Americans. And I have to preface this by saying I offer these in love that every single tribe has special and unique ways of worshiping, of celebrating, of being a part of the world. But I am going to grab a few stories so that we can highlight the richness of their stories about life and death and everything in between. So there's a story from the book by Warren Jefferson called Reincarnation Beliefs of North American Indians, How the Coastal Salish Deal with Death. The abode of disembodied spirits is believed to be another earth below that of the living. On this subject, the views of the Clallam, Twana, the tribes of Puget Sound, and those of the lower end of the Vancouver Island are quite uniform. Spirits have no difficulty in passing down through the earth to the land below. There they come first upon trails leading to a river that flows out of the east into waters far to the westward. Across this stream is a narrow footbridge consisting of 2 cedar planks that meet over the middle of the river, but they are not fastened together, and if the spirit has left a body not truly dead, it is stopped at the middle of the bridge by a dipping of the plank toward the water, by which it is forced to turn back. Often, however, such a spirit remains there until it's sought and found by some powerful medicine man and restored to its body. If life had fully departed from the body, the bridge remains firm and the soul passes over. Once on the other side, it cannot return, for the plank in the bridge dips downward again on any such attempt. From the stream, the soul follows a trail to a not distant spot where the beautiful garments, fine combs, trinkets, and all the other things buried with the body await its arrival. The spirit dresses and marches on toward the great village of the dead, the trail leading through beautiful stretches of prairie and shadowy forest glades where the very trees sing for joy. At last it is stopped by a narrow body of salt water, on the opposite shore of which live the spirits of the dead. The traveler calls across, and an answering cry directs him to step into a canoe on the beach nearby. Instantly the craft moves out, propelled by some mysterious power of its own, and as it glides forward, another, leaving the opposite side at the same moment, approaches the nearer shore to await the next spirit from the earth. Another very common conception is that the dead are conveyed in canoes from the burial ground to the other world. In the shadow world, all the good things of this earth prevail in abundance, for the spirits of the birds, beasts, and fish caught and killed upon earth pass on below to become food for the spirits. Clothing, too, all that ever was made and destroyed or worn out, awaits the dead. Great houses are ready for their occupancy, and the happy times, the great feasts, and all the assemblages where rich presents were given, once enjoyed upon earth, are there relived. There's nothing to do but to seek amusement and pleasure. The language of the spirits is a plaintive yawn. The mere wish is all that's needed to bring the object desired, be it fruit or roots, meat or fish. Death occurs in the spirit land, though rarely, and the spirit that passes on to a land somewhere beyond, whence it returns to earth, reincarnated as a newborn infant. This is the explanation offered for the strong resemblance a child may bear to a grandparent or other relative long deceased. A baby's ears often show dimples resembling the healed perforations in ears once pierced for pendants, and such an infant is believed to be the reincarnation of a long-dead child of some wealthy chief. I turn next to Chief Seattle. It's in the same book, and this passage I thought was so beautiful. Our dead never forget the beautiful world that gave them being. They still love its winding rivers, its great mountains, and its sequestered valleys, and they ever yearn in tenderest affection over the lonely-hearted living and often return to visit and comfort them. We will ponder your proposition, and when we have decided, we will tell you. But should we accept it, I here and now make this first condition, that we will not be denied the privilege, without molestation, of visiting at will the graves of our ancestors and friends. Every part of this country is sacred to my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some fond memory or sad experience of my tribe. Even the rocks that seem to lie dumb as they swelter in the sun along the silent seashore in solemn grandeur thrill with memories of past events connected with the fate of my people, and the very dust under your feet responds more lovingly to our footsteps than to yours, because it is the ashes of our ancestors, and our bare feet are conscious of the sympathetic touch, for the soil is rich with the life of our kindred. The third passage I wanted to share with you from the same book by Warren Jefferson, and I've got the links in the show notes down below, so purchase it. It comes from the Lakota people, and it's about their funerary practices. The Lakota of today don't believe in reincarnation. When people die, they go to the spirit world, but still continue to have involvement with the earthly realm. People can ask for help or intervention, but generally do not, but rather call upon the 405 designated spirits who remain accessible to people through medicine men, intercessors, and ceremonies. It's for real. When a person dies, their family keeps the spirit for 1 year, during which cultural observances regarding the relatives of the deceased are maintained. At the end of 1 year, they may have a spirit releasing or a memorial ceremony, at which time the spirit is fed and allowed to go on, not being bothered any more or bound to earth. They quit grieving at this time, and they go on, too, arriving at closure. What lovely practices, isn't it? So at the beginning of the show, I teased about my new night job. In a nutshell, I'm helping souls cross over to the other side while I sleep. Let's take a quick break, then I'll tell you all about it.
Welcome to Spirit Sherpa, the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. I'm the Spirit Doctor, Kelly Sparta, and I'm here to walk you through the next stage of your spiritual awakening. I'm here to stitch together every class you've ever taken into one big world view. Join me as we explore the extent of the energy world and the depths of ourselves, all while having a great time. SpiritSherpaPodcast.com or Spirit Sherpa on your favorite podcast player.
All right, so my new night job. It's not one I sought or found listed on Indeed.com. In fact, it's been a long time coming. So right from the start of this year, if I put others before myself, which is my natural way of being, Whether it was people or pets or whatever, I got sick. It took 3 or maybe 4 rounds of a really difficult illness that kept coming back before I understood, caught on, and made putting myself first the new norm. But if you want to know how I did that, it was mostly fake it till you make it at first. I'd get up, and as the pets were like swarming around me, begging for attention, I'd say to them, I have to do something for me first. And it felt so fake, but I said it, and I told them I promise to care for you next, but I've got to take care of me first. Then I'd do something super simple like turn on the coffee machine or get a glass of water. Then soon what felt really ridiculous started to come naturally. So next I was taught by my angel guides, especially Azrael, to see the pain of others without taking their pain into my own body. And that's saying a lot because I'm a hard-headed empath. So prior to this teaching, I would, just as an example, watch our cat Opal, who is epileptic, have a seizure, and I would physically go through the seizure with him. But after this angel guidance, I was able to see him have a seizure, and without taking it into my own soul and body, I do what I could to make sure he remains safe without suffering the shock of the whole thing along with him, right? So at that time, I felt like it was a huge skill. And I remember thinking, I wish I'd had that skill years ago. The second part, and it's going to pain me to say this, but I'm offering it right now because it's my own truth. And I offer it in love because maybe it'll resonate with you. It was not natural for me to take on the pain of others. In fact, what I learned after I stopped doing it is that I had been stealing energy from other people without their consent in order to do this. Yes, I am a reformed psychic vampire. I've done what I can to apologize to those that I stole energy from, unbeknownst to them and myself at the time. But if I missed you somehow, I am sorry for what that past version of myself did. I was wrong. It was wrong too. So how do I know it was Azrael that was guiding me? It all began with a recurring dream I had about a black dog with matted fur. I'd spent what felt like hours brushing in my sleep, brushing out his fur, taking out the burrs, combing out like little bits and pieces in it. I washed the gunk away from his eyes, and I made sure he had fresh food and water. I remember loving him so much. I mean, I can see him now in my mind. I documented the dream in my journal, and because the universe is absolutely perfect, I had a tarot reading with Karen Rontowski later that week. And as an aside, I told her about the dream, and she said that the black dog could represent Anubis. Well, I did what I do, and I researched Anubis later and found he was the original Egyptian god that guided souls to the underworld, also known as the Lord of the Dead. But soon he was overshadowed by Osiris. Azrael is archangel of death and mercy. He is the angel equivalent of Anubis. So it's no wonder he came to me in the form of this black dog to begin the next parts of my teaching. I've never met a dog I don't love. So of course it's like, oh, this black dog came to me. Now I'm going to dive down this rabbit hole. It was some evenings later, and I think it was actually a matter of weeks after I'd had those initial teachings, that I had this very vivid dream about my father-in-law. And in it, I walked into a doctor's office, and he was seated in a chair, and he looked handsome as ever. He was very well dressed in his, blazer and his suit pants and a button-down shirt. And I sat next to him, and I asked him, I said, how long have you been waiting here? And he took a deep exhale, and he said, a long, long time. And we sat together. I said, are you hungry or thirsty? Can I get you some water? And he said, no, thank you. And then a person, I want to say, it was like an orderly or something, I don't know, in a black cape, came toward my father-in-law, and he tried to assault him. And I stepped between them and I shouted, no, no, no. And I held up my hand and the black caped figure just disappeared. What's laughable here is my father-in-law in life was very tall, well over 6 foot tall. And I am tiny. I'm, a smidgen over 5 foot tall. So it's kind of funny that I would come to his defense, but that's what I did in this, whatever this thing was. After that occurred, he seemed a little exasperated, and I noticed that his freshly pressed suit was kind of wrinkled and it was kind of worn and wrinkled, like he had realized it was showing how long he'd been waiting there. And I said, would you like me to take you home? And he said, yes, I would like that very much. So he took my hand and we crossed into a place that was full of light. And then I woke up. And what's interesting to me is that I journaled the dream, and it was only then that once it was down on paper, that I realized that I had helped him to cross over. Because my father-in-law had been in a state of in-between, apparently, for the last 20 years. It was a self-imposed kind of purgatory, because he had taken on and become a Catholic in his later years of life. So that's why I say the word purgatory. And he didn't deserve that, but somehow he had put himself there. And I feel honored that he called me there to help him. The next time that I crossed somebody over, it was in a dream. It was this silly television reality show where I was traveling across the globe. I was racing against others that were doing the same thing, and we had limited resources. And I found myself stopped here and there to help children along the way. I just loved to help the kids because they were doing the race too, but I would stop and I didn't care if I came in late or last. I just was going to help them. But one person that I encountered was a tween girl. She was thin as a rail. She wore this white polo shirt and these khaki capri pants. And she couldn't have been more than like 11, 12, 13, I want to say. She told me that she didn't want to cross over until she was told that she was loved. And oh my God, it broke my heart. So I just held her. I wrapped her in my arms. I have tears in my eyes as I'm telling you this. And told her over and over that she was loved, she was lovable. And I just held her. And then she squeezed me back. And soon after that, she walked away into this bright light. The last individual I remember crossing over was a little girl of barely 2. She was nonverbal. She had long straw-colored hair. She wore a white cotton dress that reached down to her tiny bare toes. The bodice of the dress had sewn into it this crosshatch of blue, red, and yellow flowers. She said through a sort of telepathy, I guess, that she'd wanted to grow up to be a ballerina, and she hadn't gotten the chance. That's why she was still around. She took my hand and in mine, and her hand was like smooth and soft and cool, and we walked together through what felt like a public marketplace of sorts. I spotted a man of maybe 50. He was somewhat slim. He wore bell-bottom pants and a fitted button-down dress shirt. He was very sharply dressed with a scarf tied around his throat. I believe he had on a hat of some sort. I said hello, and he asked about the girl. I told him her wish was to become a ballerina. He smiled and he said, "Show me your moves." And the girl released my hand and twirled and twirled and twirled. When she came to a stop, he took her hand and told her, "With moves like that, you'll never work a day in your life." And off they went together to the beyond. The next day, in real life, I was on the treadmill about to have a run, and I opened Spotify to find music, and Elton John's Tiny Dancer played all on its own. I hadn't thought of that song in ages. I stopped the treadmill, I bent over, and I cried. And I promise I will never forget you, Tiny Dancer. So there must be rules that my higher self has laid down about this work, conditions that have to be met in order for me to accomplish this new work. I say this because subsequent sessions placed me in an aging care facility where I went room to room to room and helped people. And in another evening, I was in a family's home, their living room, where loved ones were gathered to say goodbye. So I must have agreed on some level to do this work, but it has to be done outside of my personal home. And once the evening is through, I have to wake feeling refreshed, as though I'd actually slept through the night. And I added a condition, tongue in cheek, that my cells in my body would regenerate like they did when I was 30 years old. I thought I might as well ask for the big raise since I'm negotiating. So that's how it has continued the last few months. Often I don't remember my night's work now, but I wake feeling refreshed and I tingle as though I'm being bathed in love. I know it sounds so cheesy, but there it is. This is my new life. Here's a fun fact. Thanatologists, and I don't know if I said that right, thanatologists, they're people that study life after death, along with death, dying, and bereavement. The study of life after death is called thanatology. Most thanatologists spend a lifetime researching and learning about this fascinating subject through the lens of different cultures. So I suppose I'm a thanatologist now because this subject interests me. For me, this subject includes reincarnation, and I'm not alone in this. As you've seen prior in this episode, it's very culturally accepted in other places. In fact, someone else, logical and scientific, came to believe in reincarnation after having an encounter with UFOs. I'll tell you about him after a quick break.
Ever wanted to astral project?
Speak to a loved one who's passed.
Heal people with just the touch of your hand?
Well, you won't learn how to do that on this podcast, but you will hear from those that can.
The Skeptic Metaphysicians podcast is not your typical dry and boring metaphysics show. It's a fun exploration of metaphysics, spiritual awakening tools, modalities, and personalities that's as entertaining as it is informational.
Join hundreds of like-minded souls who are growing and expanding their consciousness at skepticmetaphysician.com.
Discover the Skeptic Metaphysicians,
your new metaphysical obsession.
We're back. Okay, so if you've been listening to our very special Cascadia episodes, then you know there are many instances of high strangeness associated with the Cascade Mountain Range. One of the most famous occurred between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams 76 years ago when a pilot, Kenneth Arnold, went in search of a crash site to earn a $5,000 reward but instead of finding the crash site, he encountered 9 UFOs, or what he would later describe as flying saucers. And that was the first time that term had ever been used. I promised to go deeper into Kenneth Arnold's encounters soon and hopefully speak with one of his living family members about that and subsequent encounters on a future Cascadia episode. But what's most pertinent to today's topic is that encounter did happen, and it opened his mind to life being much more complicated than he ever dreamed about. In fact, he went on to go out with his equipment and record the encounters of other people's telling, and even recollected a sort of jellyfish-type formation at the center of the flying objects he'd observed. And he said later it pulsed like a heartbeat. He came to believe there was an element of life about those flying saucers, something he only admitted in the last years prior to his death. In the most interesting interview of his daughter, Kim Arnold, which I've linked to in the show notes, she said her father believed there was no such thing as death. There was life after life, he said. He illustrated this to her with an ice cube. He explained that she could see the ice cube. It was water in an ice cube form. Then as the water melted, it did not cease to exist. It changed form and density. He said that's what we do. Our souls, our spirits continue on after our human ice cube form gives out. That reference he made to density gave me goosebumps when I first read it. It called to mind what intuitive healer Derek Condit said about Sasquatch, if you remember, that they don't pop in and out of different dimensions. They change density such that we no longer perceive them, like changing a channel on the radio. That's why their tracks on fresh snow will seem to disappear out of the blue. Food for thought, isn't it? Edgar Allan Poe once said, "The boundaries which divide life from death are, at best, shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins?" I hope in my lifetime science catches up to the supernatural in regards to life and death and the eternal soul. In the meantime, we'll continue to explore the subject here as new discoveries are made. I created a new meditation and also linked to an old one that helps harness the power of a near-death experience from the safety and comfort of your own living room. It's offered in love. Thank you for listening to Curious Cat. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite listening app, and if you love the content, recommend us to a friend. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.